Hello and welcome to Little Things with Amber L.B. Swenson. I am so excited today to introduce to you one of my brand new friends. Her name is Liz Schroeder. She comes to us from Arizona. Hey, it's Amber, wife, mother, type A child of God. Here at Little Things, we look at everyday issues from a biblical perspective with one simple goal: to know and love God more. Thanks for listening. Liz, I have no idea where in Arizona you are right now. Give me a clue.
Yeah, so I'm in sunny Phoenix with my husband of 26 years, John, and 4 of our 5 kids. We live right on the foothills of the South Mountain Range, so I can go out and walk my dog in the mountains every day. So our oldest is married, lives in Las Vegas, no grandkids yet. She's married to a wonderful Christian man.
That's beautiful.
Yeah. So we got here. I didn't know that places like Arizona existed, but 15 years ago, we were living in Toledo, Ohio. We visited Phoenix and discovered Crosswalk Church. John was with a large solar company at the time with headquarters down here, so he put in for a transfer. Even more than the glorious weather, which I thought we were walking into a movie set when I came down here, and it was 80 degrees in May. It was really the church that drew us down here. When you find a place where your head for doctrine and your heart for the lost come together to get to that, you'll move heaven and earth.
That is a beautiful blessing that a lot of people are looking for or hoping for, and so that's unique and beautiful in and of itself. I'm
Yeah.
in Minnesota right now, and it's about -16, so I'm not at all jealous. I had green earrings on before because I was green with envy, but I took them off because that's not a Christian attribute. So I went back to silver, just so you know.
Hey, you can call me in July when I'm sweltering and you're enjoying, and the tables will turn then. But yeah,
Okay, will
it,
do,
it,
will do.
if I could just take a little time to brag on my church Crosswalk, it's so fantastic. It is really allows for people to serve in so many ways. I had someone say to me today how they're not a member of Crosswalk yet, but she had talked to our pastor and she said, "Oh, I don't know if I could be in a church where they don't allow women to be pastors." And I said, "Yeah, I get what you're saying, and but I have so many opportunities to serve that I'm not like, oh, I wish I could do that too." It just encourages volunteering on all sorts of levels. I serve as a worship team leader and a vocalist, a Bible reader during our worship times. I'm finishing writing a 3-year curriculum for high schoolers and middle schoolers called Rooted and Built Up. And then I also join a small group of pastors weekly for message prep, like opportunities like that, because we have humble leadership that welcomes other voices in. So I feel very, very blessed. And then the big one, and one of the things we're going to talk about, is that I'm a facilitator for Resilient Recovery, which is a gospel-centered recovery program for people struggling with addiction and the shame surrounding it. I'm blessed to be able to go into sober living homes and conduct Bible studies with the residents, as well as lead meetings at our church's office space. Those are open to anyone in the community, and they come in right off the streets. Sometimes still smelling of alcohol or weed. So it's you never know what you're going to get. I went through a course called motivational interviewing to be able to do that, to get to listen really well and make sure that I'm just leading in a proper way that is helpful and not harmful. It's helped me be a good listener.
Yeah.
I've tried to use that at home as well. So I lead 2 to 3 resilient groups a week, mostly with women, but sometimes they're mixed groups. Sometimes it's just men. But I've taken the first steps to be able to go into a local women's prison to lead Resilient there. But for now, that's taking a back burner because I still have 3 teenagers at home and, in sports and theater and things. So their busy schedules. I'm still a mom first. So
Yeah,
that's a little
for
bit about
sure.
where I am in my ministry right now.
Awesome. So talk to me about 2019. It sounds like that was kind of a pretty big year for you and your family. You had a fire, burglaries, you were going to therapy. What was going on during that time?
Yeah. I, you know, you say 2019, and most people are like 2019, 2020 was when 2020 happened, we're like, this is nothing compared to
Yeah.
what 2019 was like for us. Yeah, it was a minor electrical fire in our home, but it forced us to be out of our home. And they said, you'll be back in 3 weeks. So we were living in a hotel, and then that 3 weeks turned into 6 months. And we were living in an Airbnb with 7 humans in like 1,500 square feet. We had one of my daughters was sleeping out in a den or dining room area. Um,
Mhm.
yeah, it was a wild time, and I was fine. I was fine with all of it. It was like an adventure, every bit of it. Even when the first burglary happened, I'm like, oh, can you imagine? I was using all those teachable moments, like they thought they needed our stuff to be happy. Let's pray for them. Like it was all, it felt like a field trip until, yeah, it wasn't. Because during that time, the house was vulnerable because of no electricity, no security cameras, and criminals know that. So they prey on that weakness. So it was burglarized 3 times. Besides dealing with the insurance and contractors and the legal system, there was that icky feeling of being violated, of having our home exposed, strangers coming in looking at pictures of our family on the walls, rifling through our financial information, which they ended up using to commit fraud, um, touching the contents of our little girl's underwear drawers, um, taking a jar of our daughter's vacation money that she had saved for the candy store. You know,
Yeah.
um, I had homeschooled all our kids, but that fall in the Airbnb, we decided to send them to a local charter school. All in all, it was a lot of transition, and it was upheaval in a very
Right.
little time. And one of our pastors was vulnerable enough. He had shared from the stage that he had gone to therapy. And I talked to my husband. I said, I think I need some help. And he was supportive. I
Mhm.
just needed some help sorting through that. So I researched to try to find a good Christian counselor. And she was able to do the things you want. She was able to listen, empathize, affirm, direct, and give me some tools to help me deal with the anxiety of potentially moving back into our home, which now felt like a scary place.
Mhm.
Yeah, people at church would ask, oh, how's your house? And I couldn't even say my house without it getting stuck right here.
Yeah.
It was there.
And
Um,
that's really important because it's important with the work that you do that you understand trauma and that you understand triggers and therapy and vulnerability and all the things in a way, even though as terrible it was equipping you in some degree for some of the ministry that you had ahead of you.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're jumping the gun a little bit, but yes, you because we all love to see how that is, and that's the whole point we're talking, Amber, is like this is a redemption story, and I want other people to find their redemption arc, right? This is what it's
Right.
about, and realizing that God didn't waste a minute of that little T trauma of the pre PTSD. Like if I hadn't intervened, gotten help at that time, it could have turned into legit PTSD where I wouldn't be able to move back into my home, where hearing something at night would trigger a full on get the shotgun,
Right. Right. Right.
instead of
Right.
going, oh, nope, that's just my kid coming in late.
Mhm.
Yeah. So it's a little
Okay,
scary to
so
think about. Mhm.
tell us about 3.5 years ago. So you had a pretty significant change
Yeah.
that you made 3.5 years ago. First of all, what was that change?
Yeah. Well, leading into that, so I said that I was going to see a therapist, and she was very helpful for the most part. But there's two things that we definitely diverge on, and I disagree with a modern trend in psychology to shift blame to parents and there's so much of that which I believe is unhelpful. Um, and I told her that I was really trying to stay away from alcohol while I was dealing with the fallout of the house. And she was like, why? Why would you take away something that is a coping mechanism that's helping you get through a hard time?
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, my flesh said, maybe she's right. So I think I got what I needed out of therapy, but it did some damage too. So I can't
Mm-hmm.
stress enough to get a trusted Christian counselor, hopefully from someone, preferably from someone, a referral, a word of mouth referral, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So 3.5 years ago, yeah, what you're asking is, why did I quit drinking? Why did I start rooting out idolatry in all forms from my life? And so I'll have to take you back. I was introduced to alcohol at a young age and to binge drinking while I was still a teenager. Studies show that if you are exposed to that before you're in your 20s, the likelihood for addiction are just that much greater. So I really have to disagree when parents are like, it's fine if you drink when you're with me and you're underage. And that, I didn't mean to go on that soapbox, but I believe that to be true. Yeah, so drinking started out as a way to make friends, have fun, fit in, but it's a momentary high with a horrible payback. I said this in a meeting this morning with a group of ladies. Like, it is the worst type of loan that you can take out on your body. Like, Amber, if you said, Liz, I want to borrow $5, and I said, sure, you just have to pay me back 100, no problem. Would you
Yeah.
take that
Right.
deal? Right? No,
No.
it's cuckoo pants. So, but those are the repayment terms for drugs and alcohol, and some drugs much, much worse than that, where you can't even get up to feeling normal without it. While I was never physically dependent on alcohol, it became my go-to for dealing with anxiety, discomfort, stress, exhaustion, boredom, and other unwanted feelings. It was the only tool in my toolbox.
Mm-hmm.
And after a 3-decade complicated relationship with alcohol, I looked back and said that my best decisions happened when I wasn't drinking, and my worst decisions did. I tried my best for 2 years to do behavior modification, giving myself a little reward system, using willpower, going it alone. And then finally, on a Sunday, early Sunday in August of 2021, the founding director of Resilient Recovery Ministries, his name is Jason Yonker, he spoke at Crosswalk. And it was my first time singing with the worship team, so I got to hear him speak twice because I was on for both services. He had included a self-questionnaire that put in numerical terms a person's relationship, drinking patterns, and if they should get help. So I took
Mm-hmm.
the test twice, and I did not like my results either time. What I was seeing in concrete terms was the effect of my drinking on my relationship with my husband, with my family, and most importantly, with God.
Yeah. And just to be clear, I mean, a lot of people would say that you didn't have a drinking problem.
Right. My
You
doctor
had
said I
people,
didn't. Yeah.
yeah, you had people tell you, Liz, this is crazy. Like, you don't have a drinking problem. What are you? I mean, you're kind of going way out there.
Right.
It's
But it's
it
a
it
conscience issue. It is a heart issue. Your podcast is called Little Things. It's like if it might feel like a little thing, but it is a big thing. Because it was, is idolatry something small? It was what I
Mm.
was going to instead of God. And so it wasn't easy. In some ways, it was easy to give up because something so much better was there, right?
So just last week in Appleton, I spoke to a group of moms about idolatry and addictions.
Yeah.
And I said almost verbatim what you just said in terms of if you would have asked me in 2021 if I had ever struggled with addiction, I would have said, absolutely not. I have never, like I'm good. And that was before God showed me my tendency to go to food, to sugary sweets, to caffeine, to Netflix, to deal, to cope, to instead of going to him. It was my comfort, it was my security, it was my and anybody in the world is going to say that's not that big of a deal. Who cares? Have a cookie. It's not that big of a deal.
Mhm.
Well, when I'm going to, get that cookie after I've had a fight with my husband or a fight with my children, and that's the comfort. Like you said, you're taking out a loan because what's happening is it's empty calories. That doesn't actually bring any comfort. At the end of the cookie, you're still just as angry and you've still got the same situation. Whereas if you go to God, if you actually sit down and pray and say, okay, God, I might be the problem here. Like, I'm not even sure. I might be the problem. I might be fighting right now because my attitude is bad and you need to change me or you need to change the situation or whatever. But when you involve God, you're at least involving someone who can change things instead of going
Right.
to the empty things that the world offers, which are going to leave you with consequences and nothing changed.
That's it. And I don't want people to listen to this and think, well, I don't have a problem with alcohol or I don't have a problem with food, so this doesn't apply to me. Because I feel like you're missing out on having a chance to experience some grace there by seeing what you have made as an idol. And I know that we don't think of it that way, but it's whatever you go to that isn't
Right.
God to get the significance, to get love, to get assurance that you're okay. And that can be eating, it can be not eating. You can have,
Right.
right? It can be exercising too much. It can be buying things to make you feel valuable that you don't
Mhm.
need.
It
It
can be
can be
sex
it can
as
be
a
sex.
woman or a man,
Yeah,
going to your spouse for sex to feel valued and it can be all those things.
that's right. Yeah. It's everything has a place and it's just when it's Tim Keller called it disordered loves. It's just things in not in their right order. Or other pastors have said when a good thing becomes a God thing, right?
Mhm.
Like it's not a sin to have a glass of wine. Jesus turned water into wine. We know that, right? It's not a
Mhm.
sin to eat a cookie, right? Like
Mhm.
your
Right.
example. It
Right.
it's not a sin to have sex within marriage. It's like it's encouraged, but it's all everything has a place and a time. And when we try to take those things out of time or try to get that significance and love from something else, God loves us too much to allow that to happen. He lets them
Mhm.
fall flat. He lets us
Yeah.
have a sugar hangover or an alcohol hangover or shopper's regret, buyer's remorse. Yeah, whatever.
Yeah, there you go.
There's always those things that are little like, hey, that wasn't the real deal. I'm so
Mhm.
I don't want to settle for these phonies.
Mhm.
That's so
It's tough.
anyway.
Okay, so how long was it when you started going to these resilient recovery meetings to when you started leading? Because there was a shift somewhere, but how long did you go and just attend and get healed before
Yeah,
you realized there was a ministry in this for you?
yeah. So in order to get to that, let me tell you about my first meeting.
Okay.
Yeah. I was so nervous. I wanted to park in the back and wear a wig and dark
Yeah.
glasses. The shame of being a mom and a church leader who should have it all together, I almost stayed in that car.
Mhm.
So when the people come in, it's just given me a lot of empathy for when people come in for their first time, the the amount of courage that it takes to cross that threshold and say, I need help. So in-person meetings were just starting up again because it was after all COVID business. So the group was small. I was shocked, though, that I was the only woman there. I was the only woman there. After Jason had just spoken at our church, I thought the place was going to be standing room only because
Yeah.
people would have been, and again, that made me feel a little bit like, am I the only one who struggles?
Right.
So, um, yeah, I remember going over the lesson, which, everyone's familiar with like the 12 steps. This isn't a 12-step program. This is focusing, it's meditating on God's law and on the gospel. And so it's one page of one and one page of the other. And I had tears soaking both pages by the end. They were just kind of quietly just dripping off my cheeks onto the page. Um, yeah, I was a life group leader for a middle school girls group at the time, and one of the dads of the girls was at the recovery meeting. And I was so embarrassed, and I told him that after the meeting, because I said, I thought it disqualified me from being able to do ministry. And I'd said I'd understand if he didn't want me to teach his daughter.
What did he
And
say?
said, this doesn't disqualify you. In fact, you're exactly the kind of person I want leading.
Yeah.
Yeah, it made such a huge impact on me. Yeah. And now I've been able to meet with hundreds of women. So I started
Mhm.
off being the only one, and I went back for weeks being the only woman there.
Wow.
And now hundreds of women I've met with, some out of jail, rehab, mental institutions, some just off the streets, and some just out of the pews,
Yeah.
and share with them, God's grace, forgiveness, and mercy. It's the best thing ever. But there's not a moment of my wandering or my suffering, self-inflicted or otherwise, that God has wasted. I'm seeing how he's used all of my experiences. I am fully known and fully loved, and I get to tell others what God has done for me. And I want that for every single person on the planet. If I had hidden in shame and not gotten out of the car, I wouldn't know that type of peace that Paul describes in 2 Corinthians 12, which has been turning up left and right. And I just feel so much confirmation from the Lord that this is the verse for anybody who is thinking about how they could turn their mess into a ministry. It says in 2 Corinthians 12, 7 through 10, therefore, in order to keep me from becoming conceited, I was given a thorn in my flesh, a messenger of Satan to torment me. 3 times I pleaded to the Lord to take it away from me, but he said, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, I will boast all the more gladly about my weaknesses, so that Christ's power may rest on me. That is why, for Christ's sake, I delight in weaknesses, in insults, in hardships, in persecutions, in difficulties. For when I am weak, then I am strong. We are
This
on.
is such an important message that we need to get out to the women in the pews, because you and I have both talked about shame, and how it holds us so back as long as we're in that shame, thinking our sin is too great and God can't use me because of this, and unwilling to unburden ourselves in front of people who will say, you're forgiven. And a lot of them will also say, oh, yeah, I did that too. Or, yeah, me too. Or, I'm struggling as well. Almost everybody who you actually get brave enough and courageous enough to go, this is what I did, or this is what I'm struggling with. Everybody, Christian, teaching, whatever, a lot of them say, oh, yeah, I understand. Not, I excuse it, but I've struggled with it, or I know somebody who's struggled with it, or guess what I struggled with? I struggled with this. So I'm not so, squeaky clean myself. I've done things that I regret and I wish I hadn't. And how do we get that message out to women in the pews so that they're not just sitting and cowering in shame?
Wow. So it's such a great question that I had to, when I thought about what we were going to talk about for at the conference in March, like this has to be broken down because some of these steps just seem too scary to do. And I don't want people to have to sit in that parking lot alone by themselves. I want
Yeah.
them to be encouraged and walked with to get there.
Mhm.
So the first step, which is the scariest, and you might be stuck at this for a while, is just to admit it's not fine. I'm not fine. How are you,
Yeah.
Amber? Oh, I'm fine. How are you, Liz? I'm fine. It's such a flippant answer, and it's not. It's so I need to express my need for Jesus, and that's the first one.
Can I ask you something before we move on? I'm all for vulnerability. I've also been hurt by people that I trusted that weren't the right people to talk to. Um, do you have any tips for that? Because I tell people to find the people who can carry your story, and that's not everybody to me. Um, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, you are big into this recovery where people come in and they admit. How do you know who you can trust and who you can't trust?
You gotta take a leap. I think that we have good spidey senses, we have good instincts, we've got the Holy Spirit living in us. It's not spidey sense. It's the Holy Spirit. It was living in us and can give us discernment to find someone. In general, I feel like look for older women at your church. Look for women who have lived a lot of life.
Mhm.
I think about when the woman caught in adultery was dragged before Jesus, and he said he is without sin, cast the first stone.
Right.
And the first ones to drop theirs.
We're the older people.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So you said, and maybe it's a matter of just asking God to show you who that one, show me who the one or two people are that I can go to first. And maybe the first step is to go to a person. If you're struggling in whatever, go find a person. And that person, like I said, more often than not, I mean, if they're Christian and they've been in the church for any amount of time, it's amazing how people are so. I have found the vast majority are like, yep, I get it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to excuse it, but I get it. Or I've been there, or I've done something similar, or I understand.
I think we've downplayed the importance of talking and confessing to another Christian the nature of our sin that we're struggling with. We know that we can tell God and we tell him and we know that we're forgiven, and we feel like it's an extra step, that it's unnecessary. So while I want to say that forgiveness is complete, having confessed it to the Lord, your healing and your connection with another struggling Christian will be better served if you are able to confess to them.
Well, that's what James says, right? Confess your sins to one another that you may be healed. And I think there's you have that idea that there's snooty Christian women, that just walk around like, oh, I've got it all together. But if you walk with the Lord, that's not your heart, first of all. Humility, and you will find those people who turn around and gossip about you or say the wrong things or whatever. But I think by and large, there's a whole lot of Christian women who want to lock arms with others and just say, you're forgiven. Let's hold each other accountable. Yeah, I don't drink, but I know what it is to use food, so let's just hold each other accountable and walk together.
I think we're expecting that they'll be shocked and then they'll shun us. But what really happens is quite different. You
Yeah.
realize that you're way more sisters than, and you want to get close to someone. It's not your successes. It's going to be sharing your struggles. So
And I
And
also think
cheering
that
for one another's story. Yes, go ahead.
the devil works really hard to make our sin super big in our mind.
Oh, yeah.
Super big in our mind. And so you get this idea that, oh my gosh, no one would, believe or da and it's like, no, it's not really that big. Like it's not. Everybody sins. So, yeah. So I think that's a really, really important step. So I
Like, it's a
like
big
step number
deal.
1.
Like, sin is a big
Yeah,
deal, but it's no bigger
you know
deal than anyone else's.
right,
Yep.
exactly. I mean, we're all sinners. So I mean, yeah, it's a big deal. We might think that our sin is bigger than anybody else's. So if I did this, I can't tell anybody. No, we're all sinners. That's where we're at. We're all level ground before the cross.
For sure.
All right, let's move on to number 2.
Yes.
That's
Exhume.
to exhume. What do you mean?
Yeah. Um, exhume, to dig out. You think of skeletons in the closet, or, skeleton that's buried. Only proceed to this step, exhume, if you have first expressed your need for Jesus and he's walking with you through that. Because otherwise, I think we'd stand at the edge of the gravesite and just go, I'm not getting in there. I'm not digging that up. There's a reason I had that buried. It's too scary. But you think about those stories in your life. Well, there's stories that nobody talks about. And then there's parts when someone says, oh, tell me about tell me all about you. You omit things.
Oh, for
Be
sure.
curious about those. Be curious about the things that you turn like, we're not talking about that. And then examine the skeleton, being curious and compassionate. Being curious because you're just going to be a little bit more removed. Be curious like you would if it were someone else's skeleton or story. Be compassionate like you would if it was someone else's story. Sometimes we're just so hard on ourselves, or it just spirals up too much shame that we want to stop the process there. So you've got to be compassionate and curious. I encourage you to do this with godly counsel, or, like we said, a trusted friend or Christian therapist. So after that, this is a fun one. Are you ready for a fun step? I
Yes.
think
Let's have a fun
people
step.
made it through steps 1 through 3. They're ready for a fun step. And that's enumerate. It's look at the way that God showed up for you during that hard season or whatever it was. That did he show up as in a person? Did he show up in a caring community of believers? Did he show up in his word that took on special meaning, a deeper meaning during that time? Listing how God provided for you in the past will allow you to take the next steps in faith forward, knowing that he's going to be there, right? So this should be a time of like cranking up the praise music, taking a dance break, because you're like, God, you showed up for me. And because of that, I know you won't fail me in the future. You'll be there. So it's a great strengthening step, is enumerating. And
I
I
love
think you're a
that.
list person too, right? You're a
I
list
am.
girl. Yes.
I
So
am.
it's fun. It's fun. Make a list.
And it's really what God taught his people to do is to take a break and to celebrate, the festivals where you actually like now we celebrate Thanksgiving Day, or we're supposed to celebrate Thanksgiving Day, where we take a day and just go, "Hey, how has God been thankful over the last year? Let's just take a break, a breather and see that." And it's never a bad idea to stop, pause, see God's faithfulness, because as you said, that's what's going to equip you to go into the future. No matter what you face in the future, you can look back and say, but God was faithful. He was faithful back then. Therefore, I can move forward.
Now, anytime I see feasts listed in the Bible, I'm going to think about what you said. And I'm just going to be like, oh, they were taking a dance break. That's what they were doing. They piled up the stones to remember, and then they did a dance break,
Right,
Yeah.
right, for sure. Ebenezer, that's what Samuel said. He put a pile of stones and said, thus far has the Lord helped. It's always been one of my favorite quotes of the Bible, is just Samuel doing the Ebenezer and saying, thus far has God helped, which is just saying he always will. He's helped us until then. He'll continue to help.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay, go on. What's the next step?
The next step is entertain. This is entertain how God could use the story of your healing or how you are being healed in your brokenness to help others. So this is the blue sky brainstorming session. This would be really fun to do with a friend, because I do believe that there's a synergy when God's people are together, united around a common goal. I get way better ideas when I'm with people who are also excited about it. Like, we come up with some wonderful stuff. So that's a
We
fun
remember
one.
talking to you on the phone. You and I were talking like the first time I ever talked to you. We were talking on the phone, and I can't even remember what ministry we came up with at the time, but you were walking around your house, and I tend to walk when I talk on the phone too. So we're both talking and we're throwing out ideas like, you know, it would be so cool. It would be so cool if we could do this and move to that.
Yeah, it was
So,
taking
yes,
people who were in recovery homes and with a lot of downtime on their hands and connecting them with people that were in the senior
nursing
centers.
home.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and being able
Mhm.
to get them and talk about how, like, different mentoring opportunities. But yeah, we
Yeah.
were both like, "Oh, this is," yeah. And right, I know it happens when you're
So
I
when
bet you
you
get
get
that chance
other
all the time.
friends, you get other Christian friends and you
Mhm.
start just throwing out ideas, and not all of them are gonna be brilliant. But when we do not smother each other's creative process, so much comes out, and sometimes you get a gem. Like, sometimes you strike gold just from walking with your sisters and, like, "What do
Yeah.
you think of this? Yeah, what do you think of this? Or what if we did this?"
And on my own, I might shoot it down like, "Yeah, I probably wouldn't be good at that." So I show and they'd be
Mhm.
like, "You're so good at that. You should do that."
Right.
"Really?" That sometimes we're not always aware our strengths and
Huge.
limitations, whereas our friends would be like, "You don't have time for that."
So let me just say this, one of the biggest changes in my life in the past 2 to 3 years is getting together with 3 other friends. One is at home with heaven now in heaven now, but, there were 4 of us that got together once or twice a year. We took time out. We, either went to an Airbnb, a hotel, whatever, and we had a ministry weekend where we did this, where we dreamt, where we encouraged each other, and like you said, the things that I would have shot down, like, I could never do that, they would say, "Amber, stop. Like, you are perfectly equipped for that," and then we'd pray over each other, we'd read the Bible. We had all seen so much ministry growth from taking one night away to go be with sisters in Christ who would read the Bible over us, pray over us, help us come up with ideas, chat together. So I don't know if anybody is at a point in their life where they could actually do that, but I'm saying it was foundational to my ministry, my life, and it's still, I'm, as a matter of fact, tomorrow night, I will be with my ministry partners doing the same. So I look forward to it. I take time out of my schedule. If I'm close enough to make it happen, I make it happen because it is that important.
Then I would say don't pull punches. Don't give people an out and say, "I know, realizing that's not possible for everybody." Make it possible, because I think that we've all gotten so busy to think that we can't connect with Christian friends and encouragers that way, and that the enemy rejoices, because imagine what we can
Right.
do when we are encouraged in our strengths and giftedness and prayed for and with the power of the
Yes.
word. And come on, come on. So don't give them out. Just say, "Yeah, when are you going to do it?" Like,
Yeah,
go find your group. I'm already thinking of people who I know would be down for this. But
absolutely.
yeah,
And imagine if we encourage each other, which is coming, but imagine if we encourage each other, then if you have a ministry that you come up with, or you see this and you have another Christian friend who's encouraging you, then you're going to get the texts and the prayers as the follow-up. So it's not just an idea out there floating around somewhere. They're going to be like, "Hey, you pursuing that? What's going on? How's it going? What do you need me
exactly.
to do? When are we going to get together again?" And then you have the accountability. So,
Right. Yeah. Yep. That's coming up here. Yeah.
all right. So move on. What's the next one?
So this is envisioning. This is envisioning the ministry. And it's in, so the question was like, what would the world miss out on if I don't do this? And then you said, well, maybe not the world. It's like, they don't all have to be worldwide ministries we're talking about. They can be
Yeah.
a small group. It can be one person.
Mm-hmm.
When I started leading resilient groups, in the homes, I remember there'd just be one other person and I think that God knew what I could handle.
Yep.
In his mercy, he grew the ministry proportionally. And now I can walk into a room full of tough guys, and I can do that with confidence and eagerness because I am anticipating what God's going to do just by showing up. So
Yep.
you'll hear that a lot. Like, just showing up, man, it's huge. Do not
You're
downplay the importance of,
you're not wrong at all. That is a big part of the battle right there.
yeah, yeah. So that's what the question, what would the world miss out on? And just, yeah, showing up as your authentic self and submitting that to God, saying, you do with it what you want,
Yep.
whatever it is. Well, I imagine like captives set free, like people being released from the bondage of, sometimes this is generational sin that is going on.
Yes.
Just these sin patterns, and then asking, what would I miss out on by not doing this? And so I went to Wisconsin Lutheran College, and I was an English major. And so I still kind of geek out sometimes about different literary things. I came across this from Oliver Wendell Holmes in a piece called The Voiceless. And he said, "Alas for those who never sing but die with all their music in them." I don't want to be in hospice wishing that I had had the courage to tell my story. I don't want to die with all my songs in me.
And also what you said too, ministry is service, but anybody who's in ministry knows that you get as much back. I mean, it's just the way that God works. It's just a crazy thing when you do the ministry and you do the work, you are blessed over and over. In the preparation, you're blessed. You're in the presenting, you're blessed. In the friendships you have, you're blessed. In the results, you're blessed. When people come back with changed lives and say, "You encouraged me, you helped me, your story, your teaching, your whatever." And it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be a coach. You don't have to be a podcaster. You can be a friend.
Mm-hmm.
Your friendship is what got me through this hard time. You can be the one who texts someone or sends a card or calls them up or notices them on Sunday morning, or you can be the neighbor who brings over soup just because, and just let the Holy Spirit work that out. I mean, it can be the smallest things, but you will be blessed.
I believe that it's not always in the way we think, and you'll be pouring out too. So there is, just thinking about when I started off doing this and hearing secondhand trauma and getting that and having no place to process it other than taking it to the Lord, which is fantastic. But also realizing that you also need to take care of, you need to have good boundaries
Yeah.
and not too rigid, not too lenient, right? And that's going to take some trial and error. And you might have times when you might be bordering on burnout because you've poured out too much, or being on the other side of it, being hawkish with your time and saying, well, it's just, it hurts too much, or there's too much downtime afterwards because it's too heavy. So definitely don't do this alone. And that's the next one, is enlist help. No single threaded ministries there. I feel like it's choosing to be a single parent, which is just going to be a tougher row to hoe than having someone to go with you to share the struggles and share the joys. So someone that you can talk to about the ministry, and especially if there's areas of confidentiality, that you need to be able to talk to someone that you trust. And yeah, if it's not a therapist, have somebody in that same line of work with you. But anyway, a partner. So this is what
Yeah.
it is. You're looking for allies and accountability. So allies are just the people. The apostles were sent out in pairs, and then I
Yeah.
feel like we've forgotten that, and then we plunk it down a pastor in the middle of nowhere by himself and just go do ministry. And so that is something I wasn't planning on saying either, but I do believe it. It's true. Uh, but you also need accountability, because we don't want your idea that you've gone through all these steps to go through. We don't want it dying on the vine of just
No.
sitting out there. It doesn't fizzle out or, fall on the wayside of the road of good intentions, right? So you have people praying for you. I have my
Yes.
life groups praying for me, praying for my vulnerability. They're praying for this podcast. They're praying for my presentation at the women's conference, that I would be able to be vulnerable and trusting in God handling it. I also have an accountability partner I meet with every week. Her name is Amanda, and she's lifting me up, and she asks all the right questions.
Hmm.
And it's that weekly check-in as we're hiking and getting to process. It's huge. And then I have my sister, Christine Dobler, who is a missionary in Australia, but she still finds a way to encourage me from the other side of the world. So you need people in your corner. You need your people in your corner that
Can
know
we
when
just
to hug you, know when to kick you, know when what you need.
can we just go back to accountability for a minute? Because I
Sure.
feel like that, like shame, is also something that some Christians are not used to, which I have found to be so important in my spiritual growth. If I started praying, oh man, I think in 2018 or 2019, for accountability partners, for people I could trust, but friends who ask the super hard questions that you are like, do you
I
want
kind
the
of wish they
real
didn't
honest?
ask them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, do you want the real honest answer? Because I have a really good sounding answer right here that isn't honest. So, I mean, if you want the real honest answer, it's embarrassing to say that, yeah, I'm struggling with that. But those, so again, it's hard to find who that person will be always. But if you pray for them, God is so good to put the people in your life who can ask the hard questions that will actually get to your heart. Like, Amber, I'm sensing da da da. What do you think? And then, yeah, that's a struggle. I'm there.
Yeah. That might not happen instantly when you say, "Oh,
No.
I'm gonna get an accountability partner," and you meet once for lunch, and you're like, I don't know. It didn't really feel like I thought it was gonna feel. It takes.
Yep.
Amanda and I have been meeting for almost 3 years now, and we're just getting into the meat, and we're on
Yes.
the precipice of some amazing breakthroughs
Mhm.
of and it's breakthrough of being able to really understand what it means to be loved by God.
Mm.
What? And all it looks like is an hour hike every week. But what he's able to do in that time, when you are submitted to the Lord and to the word, and then you're using the word to preach to each other, and you're praying for each
Mm.
other. She has been another way that I've experienced the grace of God.
Mhm. I'm actually really glad you brought up the time thing, because I think too, you have to have gone through a certain amount of friendship to be able to trust each other and to get to the, and it almost always takes one of you starting with, can I be super raw about something I'm struggling with?
Mm.
And opening up just a little bit, kind of put the tip of your toe in the water to go like, how is she going to react to this? And then when it's a good experience, and then you opening up allows them to open up, and then you start. And the other thing that I have really noticed about the people that I go to for accountability is they are vaults. I know I can tell them the deepest, darkest parts of me. I can tell them everything, and man, they could be waterboarded. I'm not sure they would say anything because I have seen them in action talking to other people, and I've seen their response, and I'm like, "She knows." And she's
It's
just
not.
letting on like nothing happened. Like, she is awesome. And that's that whole being the kind of trustworthy person who people can come to and tell you the ugliest parts of them and what they're struggling with, and that's a real gift, and it's something for all of us to strive to be that kind of person who people can trust us with. I'm not going to go from you to her to her to you to, what you say is secure with me.
Yeah. So when you say something vulnerable, like, "Hey, can I tell you something really raw?" I I would say that's a good way to just gauge their reaction to that.
Mhm.
If it's like, "Yeah,
Right.
give me spill the tea."
Juice.
Like, yeah,
Yeah.
right. Or if it's like, "Before we do, let's pray about it. Before you
Mhm.
do, make sure that you know that I
Yeah.
am a safe person for you to tell." Like,
Mhm.
all of the things to get that reassurance. And if you don't get that, you don't
Yeah.
you don't proceed.
Yeah, and even start small. Start with
Yeah.
something you don't mind. If
Can
everybody
I be
knows,
really
like, that
raw
you
with you? These are my roots.
Yeah,
It's true.
exactly.
It's true.
Exactly. Yeah, right. I'm struggling with sugar. Yeah, everybody knows that, Amber.
Yeah.
Move on. Move
Uh-huh.
on. We've been there. So,
Mhm.
yeah. No, that's good, though. I just wanted to go back to that accountability because I don't think we talk about that often enough in our circles, how important it is, and also how good it is to find those friends who can walk through with you to bring you to that different level of spiritual maturity.
Realize that we don't actually want accountability. Like, our flesh does not want accountability. It hates the name. It hates the whole idea of it. So you will be fighting in order to keep that appointment,
Yeah.
because your flesh will look for every excuse to not have to answer. But if you think about it, it's really just these are the things that you want to do. How is that going? How is God working in your life to get those done? Those are simple accountability questions. You mentioned that you really wanted to work on this. Tell me what's been
Mhm.
happening since we last met, right?
Right.
So it
Exactly.
don't make it any scarier than it is, or bigger. But amazing things and big things can come from the small things, the little things,
Exactly.
right?
Okay. So we've enlisted, now we need to engage. What does
Yeah.
this entail?
So if you've done the other steps, you'll know that you're ready to engage. By this time, you've done the hard work of self-examination. You have reflected, and you've surrounded yourself with Christian warriors, cheerlead coaches and cheerleaders that are like, when are you going to engage? They want this for you, and they'll tell you if it's not the right time either. And this goes back. Just show up. Just do the thing. And whew, it is, take the step, take the leap, knowing that you're jumping into the Father's arms, right? You're there. So he's there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. Ninth, educate others.
Yes. This step is like falling off a bike easy, because when you found something that you love, a product or a service, don't you tell everybody about it? I mean, we're not even like
Mhm.
paid influencers or anything. You're just like, I gotta tell you, this is working great for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Um, if you're living in the freedom of a redeemed life, this step will just come naturally. Imagine a world where everyone was telling their story to help one other person.
Yeah.
So just tell them, this is what I went through. This is what my process was like. Is there something in your life that God might be using to,
Beautiful.
yeah, change people's lives, to get them to meet with their savior and experience grace in a new way? Like, that's exciting to me.
All right. Last, we're going to exalt.
Yes. So this one is it's a biblical truth from resilience. It comes from It says, exalt Jesus above all things. So lifting him up by keeping Jesus at the center of your ministry, high and lifted up in the right place, it will keep out things like pride and burnout. And the exalt, this is another great time to turn on the praise music and do a dance break. This is celebration of what God has done. I think it's easy when we're doers to not
Yeah.
indulge in celebration, but it gives God so much glory. David danced with all his might before the Lord, right? And so exalt Jesus above all things. So we're at 10 E's. So
how to take your shame and your mess from being something shameful and turning it into the message and something that you can use in God's kingdom for his glory. Hopefully. And the truth is that Christians, the best way to introduce other people to God is just by being real and talking to them and loving them. And this is part of that, is not making it look like you've got it all together and you've had it all together, but to be able to say, look, I was lost and God changed my life. And I want you to experience, like you said, that same freedom that I found.
that is it. And what you've gone through will give you empathy with people in a way, and to be able to connect with them in a way that your successes never could.
Yeah.
So it's okay. Like, don't be afraid of doing some spiritual spring cleaning and going into those dark corners that might have all sorts of dust and cobwebs and mice and whatever droppings, and dig out. You don't know what's going to scurry out when you start cleaning in there, but knowing that the light is there, God is there. Bring your shame out of darkness into the light. Let God use it all and to his glory.
Liz, I love your heart. I love what you're doing. I'm so excited that we're going to be together shortly. This will air after our Unbreakable conference, but we are recording it prior to. But I'm really excited for people to get to see you and meet you and hear your heart and know what you've been through and how you're using that. And hopefully it will encourage them to take these steps as well. So thank you for being willing to be here and be my guest today.
Thank you so much, Amber. And if people are wondering like how they can find out about having a addiction and recovery ministry in their own church, if that would even work, or even in their own home to start out, they can go to restinjesus.org and find out about having resilient. It's my dream that it would be in every church, that every city would have one, not just for alcohol and drugs, but for any area where people can receive the grace and forgiveness that they are so hungry for. So thank you very much for this time together.
You are welcome.